The amount of times I've clicked on a video, only to find out that it's being narrated by an AI voiceover using an AI script, is really starting to get on my nerves. The protagonists in these stories seem to say that they have it all figured out, or how they thought they had it all figured out. Yet if you hear that at the start of the story, you can be pretty sure that it's AI. In fact, it is AI, and someone who's lived in the Philippines for a long time, I think it's only right to say what's actually going on from the perspective of an actual expat, not a machine. I know I'm not going to describe the smell when I got out of the airport, because if you listen carefully, that appears to be in every single one of the AI stories, and I wonder why. Other than that, I guess my story starts just like everyone else's, going to the Philippines in the first place. I never considered it to be such a remarkable thing, going to a different country. It's something most of us will do over the course of our lives on multiple occasions. We'll go, have a good time, or a bad time, and return home, because that's just where we're from. It's hard to put it in words when you go on vacation, arrive at the place you're going to, and immediately feel more at home there than you did where you're from. That was the Philippines feeling that captured me. It came over me in a way that was too strong to ignore. I tried my best to ignore it, knowing that you can't just move halfway around the world just because of a feeling. But that feeling was too strong to ignore. When I returned home, 3 weeks after arriving in the Philippines, nothing felt right anymore. Everything felt so alien to me back at home. I felt the way things were done at home were wrong in comparison to how I found things in the Philippines. In a way, the Philippines had kind of grabbed hold of me and tied a noose around me. And although the noose was made of elastic and could stretch infinitely, it was still tied around me when I boarded the plane home, and it was still there when I was at home, like this invisible force trying to pull me back to the Philippines. After only 2 weeks of being back, I knew I couldn't ignore those feelings anymore. I needed to do something about it. I hadn't met a girl when I was in the Philippines, if you're thinking that. I didn't fall in love with a bar girl and decide to change the course of my life to go and be with her. It was the country more than anything else. Knowing that the girls were there was a big bonus and a big draw, but it was the country, how it made me feel when I was there, and how it seemed like the stuff dreams were made of. Started doing a bit of research looking into how to actually move to the Philippines. I was already quite close to retirement age anyway, so I started thinking about moving my retirement forwards. This was in 2010, 15 years ago now. But those 15 years seem to have passed so quickly that it almost feels like yesterday. Everything I owned meant nothing to me now. I'd spent my life up until I was 55, which I'd just turned 3 months before visiting the Philippines, accumulating, saving, investing, and trying to get as much stuff as possible. That was my life until going to the Philippines, and I suppose that was why I had enough money to move if I wanted to. I stayed single ever since I got divorced about 17 years before this, so that meant I was a free agent to do as I pleased. The Philippines changed me in a way. It made me realize that life was for living, and I wanted to live. And it didn't take me very long to actually decide that, you know what, I've worked hard enough, I've saved hard enough, live a little, do what your heart's telling you to do, and move back to the Philippines, live there, and if things go wrong, you can always move back. What's the worst that could happen? When I moved there, I guess I had about $700,000, which I'd continued to invest since I got divorced. More than enough returns to live on the Philippines. It was always my target to get to $1 million. I hadn't got there yet, but that would come just by holding on to it. But I quickly found that the income I was getting was more than enough to be able to live a great life in the Philippines. When I was there originally, for 3 weeks, I went to as many places as I could. I guess I rushed most of it because I wanted to see as much as I could. Manila, Cebu, Bohol, Angeles City, and I even went down from Manila to Batangas. I'd heard there was an island just over from there, yet when I got there I was expecting to be able to just get on a boat and go. But I found out they only had a boat a day and it was in the early morning. It was a bit difficult as well, so I just went back to Manila. But that's not important. My favourite place just happened to be Angeles City. I loved everything about it. Most of it was just a sense of freedom you got when you were there because everything was so affordable. I'm not going to pretend to be some kind of white knight here. I loved going to the bars. I loved the girls there. And I just loved the Philippines. My memory is a little hazy. When I originally moved to the Philippines back in 2010, Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was about 48 pesos to the dollar. Things were really cheap, but the exchange rate was actually worse before. Considering now we're getting closer to 60, I think things in the Philippines have got more expensive, considering many of the important things have got to cost more to be brought in, but local things I found remained somewhat sensible. What I'm saying, for me and my base, which was 48 pesos, when I went in, I kind of knew that the Philippine peso could be quite volatile, so I came to the decision that it might not remain the same and you have to allow a 20% fluctuation in either direction because you never know what's going to happen. But even when I did that calculation, it was still more than enough money for me to live on, regardless of what happened, so I wasn't too concerned. I kept all my money back in the States. If I needed any money, I would just transfer it in. I keep about 2 million pesos in the bank in the Philippines just for emergencies, but other than that, nothing else. I found it a really great place to live in Angeles City. I found a great condo to live in, which cost me $350 a month, and it was everything I thought I needed. I started mixing with other expats, started making friends, and just getting involved with the country more. After I'd been there for a while, I felt like I was getting to know life in the Philippines more than I did when I first arrived, and I was starting to get very comfortable there. I'd made friends, and that's when you understand that living in the Philippines is very different to how things are at home. I had a friend group, probably 10 guys in the early days, maybe not close friends, but all of a sudden one guy's not there anymore. Nobody knows where he is, nobody knows where he's gone, just up and left. And it was always the talk of he's probably run out of money and gone back home, and he was too embarrassed to admit to it. He was fleeing the country, I think would be the modern terminology that you would use to describe that. Then before you know it, you meet this other guy who's just moved there, and he's excited to be in the country as a new expat. And I understood that while you can make friendships and get to know people, it's a lot more transient by the very nature that all these guys are from different countries living somewhere else as an expat. Many of them fall out of love with the country. Many of them get in relationships and the relationship goes wrong. Many of them get bored and want to move somewhere else. Yet every time someone leaves that you get to know quite well, before long someone else comes and you get to know them instead. That was what I got from the first 6 months to a year of being in the Philippines. I was getting used to being somewhere different, something I wasn't used to before. You grow up in the same place, you live in the same area that you grew up in. A few people leave and go somewhere else, but most of the people you grow up with remain where you were from. And it's a very big thing when someone comes and goes. I mean, not a big thing, but in comparison to what it was when you're in the Philippines, when someone new comes, it's kind of like, I wonder how long they'll last before they leave. Or I wonder how long they last before they get all their money taken from them because they fell in love with a girl in a bar. And then when you get to know a guy for a longer amount of time, you're shocked when he goes because it was always, like he said, he was a lifetimer. One thing that many expats will tell you is the very phenomenon and something you don't expect when you move there because you've never experienced it before. Before long, it just becomes normal, and that's kind of how you treat friendships, or like it's a temporary friendship. I think there's only one guy I'm still friends with who I met when I first moved to the Philippines. I've had many friends along the way, so I'm saying that because I find it to be quite interesting in terms of being an expat. I suppose this goes for any other country as well. The Philippines is no different. Back in 2010, I was comfortably spending around $1,700 a month. That included going away occasionally to different parts of the country, going out often, living in a decent place, and I think that was a typical budget. In 2012, I started spending a little bit more than that. I'm not trying to say I'm completely devoid of making mistakes because, just like many guys do, I did meet a girl in a bar. I'd done that lots of times and enjoyed it, but this time I took things a little bit too far with her. It started out just meeting her, then seeing her more regularly, then she's moving in with me, then we're going away together and we're talking about getting married. Then we're even talking about moving to her province and building a house. I'd met a few guys who had built houses by that point. Some of them were doing okay, some of them weren't there anymore. And I came very close to actually moving ahead with this, until I found out some uncomfortable truths about my girlfriend that I was not prepared to overlook. I was very thankful that I found out these things before I made any commitments, but she was together with me for I would guess nearly a year in total, So I probably spent during that year an average of $2,500 a month, just on the fact that I was supporting her as well. After that relationship came to an end, I understood that perhaps it wasn't the thing for me to do, to try to have a serious relationship with someone, especially someone younger than me, especially someone that worked in a bar. But even still, if I met anybody in the Philippines, even if they didn't work in a bar, I understood that the only reason that they would be with me was financial. If that was the case, then I might as well not actually get into a relationship and just enjoy the bars and continue that, because I did enjoy it. Everyone is free to enjoy themselves as long as they're not harming anyone else, so I don't see any problem with it, just enjoying myself that way, because the relationship that I had could have destroyed me financially. I was just one step away from that happening to me. All the stories you hear about those guys that lose everything, that could have been me if I didn't find out the things I found out. But then again, I don't think it would. Perhaps I might have built a house, but there was no way she could have got anything else out of me because those were my investments, giving me my income, paying for me to live. That moment in time, I was actually getting more from my investments than I was spending. So in a way, I felt like I was being paid to live in the Philippines, which was incredible. But it's exciting to be there. After that relationship, I guess I went back to spending roughly the same amount, $1,700 a month. This did fluctuate. Some months you spend more, some months you spend less. Some months you might spend $5,000 going to stay in a nice resort for a few weeks, take a girl with you. Yet some months you might only spend $1,000 because you can't be bothered to do anything and you just want to sit at home and read. It was very changing, but that was the average, I think, because I did pay very close attention to money because it's important. I'm meeting new expats arriving all the time, and you can always tell when there's a new guy there because it's either one of two sorts of guys. At least, I found. There's the guy who has never been to the Philippines before, never travelled before to Southeast Asia even, who has these wide-eyed opinions about what his life is going to be like there. How he thinks his girl is different, how he thinks he's found a way to cheat life in a way by living in the Philippines on his income, which at home wouldn't have given him much. Then you have the guys who perhaps have been travelling to the country a lot, maybe travelling around the region a lot. They know their way around, they've spent time there before, they know all the scams and all the tricks, and they seem to be the ones I get on with best. I started playing golf with a few guys. I'd never played golf in my life, so it was interesting to take up something different. And then you're meant to be meeting people for a game of golf. 3 of us are going and one guy doesn't show up. We can't contact him, never to be seen again. I suppose he fled the Philippines. If there was another guy leaving at the same time, maybe another guy leaving at the same time, 3 expats leaving in one day, I suppose you could call that droves. You would have to define droves quite loosely to actually get that far, but then you meet new people. I didn't really leave the Philippines. I travelled around the Philippines a lot for a number of years, and I'm trying to think, did I leave the Philippines? I'm sure I went somewhere, but I can't even remember that, so it can't have been good even if I did leave. When COVID happened, up until that point, I was still spending roughly the same amount of money for the same lifestyle. Investments go up and down, but average out and continued to go up. I just never sold. So most of the income I was getting, maybe not most, maybe just under half, was actually being reinvested anyway. So I could have spent more if I wanted to, but I never felt the need to, because I could do everything I wanted for the budget I'd set. COVID was an interesting time in the Philippines. They took the masks way too seriously for my liking, but I complied because it wasn't my country, so I didn't care like I would have if it was my country. I probably spent less money during COVID than I did the other times because you couldn't go out. I was able to meet up with a few girlfriends casually for a bit of company, and that was when I noticed a few expats did leave because they weren't able to earn anymore, not the non-retired guys. Many of the companies started to shut down that they worked for. But many guys remained on. It was a difficult time for everyone, but in the Philippines it was great, and I'm still living in Angeles City, thinking I'm very fortunate to be here, because there's nothing that's really changed since I moved there. I mean, things are changing, but normal change. One thing that started happening was the peso was weakening. I mean, it had fluctuated a lot. I think in 2008, if I remember correctly, it was around 53, something along those lines, and then it went back down again, but then after COVID it goes up again and starts to get stronger, the dollar that is, and the peso getting weaker. After COVID, I noticed a huge influx of brand new expats moving to the Philippines. This was on a scale like I'd never seen before. I'd say 100% increase, maybe it's doubled. That's what it felt like in terms of people actually moving to the Philippines. Many of these guys, from what I spoke to them about, had spent time during COVID cooped up by themselves, watching people on YouTube make videos of their lives in the Philippines, saying how great it was, how fantastic it was, and how cheap it was. And these guys were drawn to that lifestyle because they were bored, alone, and suffering the huge inflation going on at home, thanks to the excessive money printing that was allowed to happen. Many of these guys that I ran into, and I'm a very sociable guy, so I run into a lot of people, but many of them had never been to the Philippines before. Many of them had never left their own countries before, and they were going in based on advice of somebody that they watched online, talking about how they loved the Philippines and how it's the best thing that they ever did by moving there. I was always very wary of people who made videos like that because they were only showing one side of it. What happens when they turn the camera off? They're all happy and very smiley on camera, everything's good, and then they turn the camera off and like, God, that's over. Thank God it's out of the way. You never know how they actually feel. Two sides. So many people move to the Philippines not even knowing anything about the country, expecting it to be like their own country, but cheaper. So many people were in for a shock. And I had lots of conversations with guys saying, I can't believe it, I moved here, I don't like it, I'm struggling to adapt, how different it is. Didn't think to come and visit first, but that's one thing I found after COVID. Probably talking around 2022, something like that. And at that moment in time, I guess I was spending probably slightly more. I mean, I had more money to spend, so I could spend more. Probably $2,000 a month I was spending at that moment. At the exchange rate since I moved there, you were getting about 10 pesos more for every dollar. I could have spent the same amount of dollars and probably had the same lifestyle as I had when I first moved there, but it maybe would have been 10% worse, only marginal. But because the peso has weakened, many local items in dollar terms were actually cheaper than when I arrived. Not many, but some were. Yet you would find things have gone up in price for imported things because, of course, the Philippine peso is weaker, you need more of those to buy the items. While day-to-day living expenses have gone up slightly, I'm finding because of what's going on with the dollar that I have to compare it to when I first arrived. Personally, I don't see that much of a difference. Certain things definitely went up more, maybe quite a lot more. I found entertainment was going up a lot, and before it was very affordable. Maybe eating a nice Western meal before was a lot more affordable. Local food in dollar terms, very similar, maybe marginally more expensive, maybe similar or maybe less, so not much of a difference. All the time, though, when I'm there, the guys complaining about things being more expensive were the guys who wanted to be able to go into the bar and pay the same for a girlfriend than they could before. But that changed. And it's the guys who are on very low budgets complaining that what they used to spend 80 pesos on was now 100 pesos, not understanding that back home in their country, things had gone up considerably more. I understand that certain countries and certain currencies that people haven't performed as well as the dollar. Perhaps they're actually getting less pesos than they were before. So that's one thing to take into consideration, but in terms of dollars, I find it to be better. I'm finding that while things have gone up in price, the increase of the dollar has softened that, and it's an interesting situation when you run into a guy complaining about things. He's usually the guy who has blown through all his money. He's usually the guy who has gone mad, the guy who got married like I nearly did and built a house and lost his money to a girl, the guy who wants that superiority feeling that just because he's from the West, he's entitled to have things at a certain price. One thing I'm noticing though, and this is going into 2023 and 2024, is that lots of the guys that moved after COVID are throwing in the towel. They're saying no more, I can't take it, it's not what I thought it was going to be. Many of them are still staying on. But I'm noticing that these new expats who are only really there because of watching online content, thinking that it was for them, people who under normal circumstances wouldn't have moved there if it wasn't for online content, people who wouldn't have moved there if it wasn't for COVID, these are the guys who are leaving in quite big numbers. In terms of visas to live in the Philippines, it's been quite similar ever since I arrived. Quite a straightforward process to get a visa if you're of retirement age and you can put a bit of money in the bank. But I've always looked at it in such a way as, it's for your visa, write it off, forget about it. You can save it and maybe get it out if you leave, but it's for your visa, so all well and good. If that's your life savings or a big portion of your life savings, then it's a bit different. But for me, it was just a small amount of money. I wished I could have got the equivalent of the marriage visa. That would have been permanent, But after that failed relationship, when I could have had bad things happen to me financially, I didn't think it was worth risking it. But there haven't really been many changes since then, and if a guy wants to move to the Philippines and he's got enough, he can do so. One thing that is important, which I kind of understood but I'm not concerned either way, is how many people say that things have changed in the Philippines. They say that the people in the Philippines have changed, that they are more likely to scam you, more likely to try and take money out of you, they're more likely to want more than they would have wanted when you first arrived. For in 2010, for example, like I did. Well, I personally witnessed that. I don't understand how that could be considered an argument, because of course people want more. Don't you? I do. I want more with the passing of time instead of less, because that's generally what the idea is. I think many people, especially some of these guys that moved in 2022, were listening to people who described how things were 10 years ago, or described how things were when they first arrived in the country, and they were selling these dreams of how it was before to people, and these people expected it to be like that now. I think that's a big problem. If I started talking about how people were in 2010 on a video, yet I'm not saying that this is how they were in 2010, and I'm pretending that this is now, of course it would be inaccurate, but that's what many people seem to do. I'm not even saying that people changed a lot. I'm just saying that they changed as everybody else in the world has changed, reacting to the events that happen around us. Everyone seems to want more, but I think a lot of people who moved to the Philippines come, especially after COVID, kind of saw how much more expensive things were getting in their own country, so how much further their further was meant to go in the Philippines, yet somehow expected that people in the Philippines would stay at the same level just to accommodate the fact that this guy's got a budget of $1,000 a month and he wants to be able to stretch it going to the bars every day. It doesn't work like that, and someone from their own country isn't going to do that just to give someone this possibility. I don't know if I'm overthinking this, but that's kind of how I think about things. I have a friend who spends 9 months a year in Thailand, 3 months in the Philippines, and I was speaking to him recently about this supposed fleeing of expats from the Philippines. It was interesting because he spends most of his time in Thailand. He went on to talk about how in Thailand many expats are leaving Thailand for a multitude of different reasons. In Thailand, the baht is quite strong in comparison to before, hasn't weakened like the Philippine peso has, which has made a huge difference for expats there. Saying that people are noticing how much more expensive things are in Thailand, and he goes to the Philippines to save money. Especially in places like Bangkok, the prices are going insane, according to him. I don't know, never been. And the trend of talking about how leaving Thailand and fleeing Thailand and expats leaving the country is a popular topic. Thought that was very interesting, and this was maybe 6 months ago when I was speaking to him about that. Very interesting that there was this trend. That's when I started to spend more time watching YouTube myself. I've never really spent much time on it, but I started enjoying it and getting into it and following different channels. I've never seen anyone talking about how expats were fleeing the Philippines. You come to see the occasional video, but it was just a one-sided approach. Sometimes a guy who perhaps failed and was leaving and saying he knew other people leaving too. But he didn't talk about everyone who was arriving at the same time, because there always are. But then this AI trend, I've started seeing videos talking about guys leaving the Philippines, fleeing the Philippines in droves, talking about how it's much more expensive than it used to be. And you can hear it in all the stories because they say the same things. I have a problem with this because, from someone who's lived in the Philippines since 2010, I don't honestly think things have increased in dollar terms. Maybe slightly, but not excessively. I can still go to a bar and have a beer for less than $2. Perhaps before it was a similar price because the peso was stronger, but I don't see a huge difference. And while I'm spending more money than I was before, it's because I can, because I want to. I live in a nicer place than I used to do, which costs more money. You can still find a place for $350, but it might not be as good as before, maybe $450. $100 extra is not a lot of money, and it shouldn't make or break someone's retirement in the country. Let me tell you how much I spent last month. That should give you an idea, and this is a guy who could spend more if he wanted to. I spent $450 for my accommodation. Add $150 to that for my utilities and internet and my cell phone. My insurance isn't cheap. I spend $400 a month for that. It's not going to cover everything, but I have enough money for any eventuality where I can pay myself if needs be. That takes us to about 1,000, so I have 1,000 left. 58,000 pesos I have to spend on what I want to spend on. I go out 2 or 3 times a week. I eat local many times, but also international cuisine often, and I cook at home. And I find that I can have a great life for that, and maybe I have money left over at the end of most months, and I use that to travel to different parts of the country. I do understand that I'm getting older. I'm 70 years old now, and I'm of the mind that I want to live this lifestyle as long as I possibly can. But I would say, if you're moving to the Philippines, $2,000 is enough to have a good lifestyle there. Before, if I wanted to do exactly like what I do today in 2010, how much would that have cost me in terms of dollars? Probably 1,700. That's what I would say the difference was then and now in terms of dollars, so not too different. While I was spending 1,700 before, I wasn't going out as much, so that's my comparison. Now then, in terms of why so many retirees are fleeing the Philippines, why are so many foreigners leaving the Philippines altogether? From the opinion of the guy who has lived there for 15 years, I would say that while there are many people leaving the Philippines, it's no more than has always been the case. Aside from what happened after COVID when so many people moved there and so many people realised that it wasn't what they thought it was going to be, perhaps more people left then, but there have always been people leaving the Philippines, yet there's always been people moving to the Philippines. So while I don't have any actual numbers for this, I would like to actually have real figures because I would guess that I would be proved right. How many? Let's just say Western expats because this seems to be who this is targeted at. But how many Western expats were leaving the Philippines in 2010? And how many Western expats were moving to the Philippines in 2010? And also in 2005, what were these numbers? I would guess that there probably is a similar number. I would guess there are more people living in the Philippines now than before, but you never know. Only before it wasn't spread out all over the internet, when a certain thing happened that caused somebody to leave. I'm not saying that the Philippines is for everyone, it's not. Many people struggle and wouldn't be able to live there because it's very different to what they're used to. I know that many people get tripped up when they go to the Philippines because they lose their mind in a way when they step off the plane. They start doing things that they would never do at home, just like I knew they did. I know they got married to a girl that I met in a bar, and that makes me angry with myself that I even thought it was a good idea. But many guys still do it. Many guys lose money and have to leave because while what these girls do to them is awful, maybe they should have known that something like that was possible because they should have understood it for what it was. The Philippines to me has been the best thing that I ever did. I lived a great life in the Philippines and I continue to live a great life in the Philippines, and I don't personally find it so much different to how it was in 2010. What I would say to anyone thinking about moving to the Philippines is go to the Philippines and have a look for yourself. Do you like it? Yes, good. Think about spending more time there and living there. I moved there after only being for a 3-week visit, so I was very lucky, but I liked it. Go see for yourself how much things cost, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. To finish off, I would just like to say thanks for allowing me to share my story. Perhaps it's not typical for the other stories that you like to share, but even still, I think it's a valuable thing. I honestly don't believe that expats are fleeing the Philippines in droves, because I just don't see it. I also don't believe that the Philippines is considerably more expensive than it was. Why? Because I just don't see it. Has it changed in some aspects? Yes, of course it has, but where hasn't? If you want to retire to the Philippines, 2,000 should be good. If you want to get married to someone who's 30 years younger than you, perhaps increase your budget considerably and don't expect that she's with you for any other reason than money, and then you should be okay there too. The Philippines really is great. You have to understand it for what it is. You've got to get to know it. And once you've done that, you're halfway there. What I would also say is, when you're watching people online making videos, especially these guys going on about how fantastic things are, perhaps it is for them, but you also have to consider that they're making videos for their benefit as well. You might like their content, you might get along with them in your mind even though you've never met them, but you have to also consider that what happens when they turn off the camera. The positivity only things that I used to see just when COVID was happening and after COVID slightly, I think caused many people to move to the Philippines who perhaps shouldn't have moved to the Philippines, because they did so thinking it was something that it wasn't. Now that we are in some kind of equilibrium where not many people are actually moving now, I mean, people are still moving, a lot of people are still moving, but we don't have that sudden influx because the world was closed down and now it's open again. I think we're back to normal. Try the Philippines. If you like it, great. If you don't, move on. But you can't say that people are fleeing more than before because I've not seen it. They're not. And if anything, I would say more people are moving to the Philippines now than ever before because it's a great country. I love it, and here I will remain.